Hey guys, Paul here. So today's Yu-Gi-Oh discussion is a little bit different. I think we've all been sort of burned out of the Yu-Gi-Oh price discourse recently over the last couple of weeks. So this is an issue that I've seen more people talking about, though it's still kind of a whisper in the crowd, if you will. It's something that has kind of been around in Yu-Gi-Oh since the beginning of the competitive era or whatever. But it's the question: which do you prefer? Diverse formats where a lot of different decks can make tops and get results at the high level? Or do you prefer formats that have only a small handful of top decks with, very deep matchups between each other, but those get all of the results? So it's a bit of a nuanced discussion for sure, and one where I want to share my own thoughts, get you guys' thoughts. We're gonna weigh both sides. I'll weigh in with my kind of just preference, and I have some miscellaneous things at the end to add as well. Okay, so for people who want diverse Yu-Gi-Oh formats, we'll start with that. A lot of people want, they like the idea that many different decks can top and win at the game. Many different decks have a chance to compete, so you'll see a lot of different rogue options. For instance, at YCS Bologna, we saw a pretty interesting deck manage to win, which was Bestial Runic, but also outside of kind of the expected contenders of like Rescue Ace, Unchained, TR Element at the time, obviously the ban list has happened since then, those were kind of the decks that people expected to win. That's sort of 2-3 decks that you would expect to prepare for and see. However, the top 64 breakdown was absolutely wild. There was just a little bit of everything in there. You had like Vanquish Soul, you had Centurion, you had Makonko, you had just all kinds of random different things. And I think that a lot of people like seeing Yu-Gi-Oh events that have varied results. It makes the game feel fresh, it makes the game feel vibrant, and so yeah, that's kind of that. Now on the other hand, there are people who prefer formats that are much smaller and more concentrated, where only a small handful of decks, maybe 2 to 4 perhaps decks, are the ones that you expect to encounter, the ones that you can really prepare for. And I think the reason that a lot of people like those is because it makes preparing for events, obviously, much easier. You know exactly what the threats are and how to prepare for them, and so you can bring your absolute A game against all of them, as opposed to having to prepare for a wide field of different things that maybe feel like very gimmicky or something like that. And also because among those top decks, they can have really, really kind of nuanced, deep, interactive, layered matchups. I think that it's important here to also draw the distinction between that and maybe like a tier 0 format, which is a slightly different, maybe more extreme thing. That's like your TR Elements a couple years ago, but also we've had other tier 0 formats like Zodiacs or maybe Dragon Rulers, Necrons. There's some other ones you might hear about. So yeah, I think both sides have their merits. There's also a bit of a conversation that people will have around what better represents or expresses skill in the game. Some people would say that if there are a lot of different decks and the field is very broad, there's a lot of variety, then if you can, withstand a tournament amidst all of that, that is a better representation of skill, because it's like, a skilled duelist could, hold his own against a lot of different decks, right? That would be the idea. But some people think that it's actually more skill expressive to have a small handful of matchups that are extremely deep and extremely rewarding or something like that, and that is a better representation of skill. So, where do I land amidst it all? Typically, I know in these videos I will oftentimes kind of walk the middle ground or something, or say, well, both sides have their merits. I think that is true. I do think both sides have their merits. My answer is a little bit selfish. So, as you guys may or may not know, I have played a lot of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Myself in the past. I've gone to lots of regionals, I've gone to YCS events, I've managed to get some regional tops and some invites and stuff, so, that's been really cool. I'm obviously not, the world's best competitive player, clearly not, right? But, I have been there. I've been through the process of preparing for events. I've played in events, I have faced, weird decks, I've faced meta decks, I've kind of done the whole gauntlet. And I would have to say that as a competitor, I prefer kind of dense known formats. I love the ability to know exactly what to expect, and in the week leading up to an event, just playtest hard and really prepare hard for that small sort of set of decks, right? I can feel confident in making specific sort of like main deck tech decisions that are meant to be just the best deck at the time, or, fashion my side deck for dealing with those common matchups. On the other hand, if I play against, a wide field of things where I maybe don't know how the random Magical Musketeer deck works, or exactly how to deal with Vanquish Soul, or what exactly the rulings and kind of play lines of Centurion is, and I end up losing to them, that can kind of, it feels rough, right? Like I prepared for one thing and I played a completely different thing, and that sort of sucks. So I would say that as a competitor, I really like those narrow formats. However, because I don't currently play as much competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! In person, still play a lot of Master Duel, but not so much in person, I actually really have started to like diverse formats at YCS events. I think that it's fun to watch, particularly on stream. I watch a lot of YCS streams, and it sucks when you kind of watch the same matchup like every single round. Like I remember back at the TR Elements sort of format where that was the deck that you'd kind of face just in every round. You'd just be watching the same matchup you saw the last round and the round before that. So I think that as a spectator, it is certainly a little bit more exciting and feels more promising. Like if you're kind of a Yu-Gi-Oh player who's getting into the game or kind of getting better at the competitive thing, but you want to kind of do it with different rogue decks or things you like, then it's nice to see that, hey, any deck can win. So I think from the outside looking in, that sort of format seems better, but I think that when you're the person sitting in the hot seat having to prepare for an event and you're like, man, I just have no clue what I'm going to face, that's its own kind of brand of stress. I think though, to the argument that people might make that like, well, it's like even though it's like fun and all to be able to prepare for decks, some people would say, well, you need to, as a duelist, you be able to like answer a lot of different threats and know about a lot of different threats and kind of be very knowledgeable about all the different things you can expect to find. I think that that argument is fine, although I would say maybe that like what I tend to do when I know that there's a lot of different stuff, floating around is I just fall back on floodgates more. I know people don't like those, but if you know that you're going to face just who knows what at some regional or something, it's tough to really have a side deck for everything. So it's probably better to just go with something like a Gozen match or a Rivalry of the Warlords or Skill Drain or something that can just shut down a wide variety of decks. So in that way, you're still prepared for them. At least that's kind of how I would always sort of manage it. One analogy that I would maybe make is I play Super Smash Bros. Melee. Some of you guys might know about it. It's a game where there are 26 different characters, but really only the top like 6 or 7 characters or so are considered truly viable. However, you will face those characters a lot and a lot and a lot, like when you play in events, tournaments online or in person or whatever. And those characters also are very deep, very layered. They have a lot of different play styles and nuances. And so it can feel really satisfying to improve at those few matchups. But I think that for somebody who maybe doesn't know the scene that well, they'd be like, okay, why do everybody just plays Fox? Like that's boring. You feel like I just see the same like 3 or 4 top tier characters all the time. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like the difference between watching and maybe playing. So yeah, my selfish answer is when I'm watching an event, I like seeing a lot of decks. When I'm playing an event, maybe not so much. My sort of go-to, like my actual experience, just to share the anecdote with you guys, is I played Grin Maju, for instance, back in 2019 a lot, and I liked it because outside of being able to main deck the broken-ass card that is Super Poly, I had a really good matchup in general against the Orcus deck, which is super popular at the time, and I was able to learn that matchup and like Salamangrates and stuff really, really closely so that like I knew every little interaction that they would do before they would do it, and I was able to see some really good results because of that. Or I played Cyber Dragons when Sky Strikers were really big, and I was able to sneak a lot of easy wins because like Sky Striker monsters are all machines, or at least the Link monsters are, and they use the extra monster zone a lot, and Cyber Dragon is kind of a good direct counter to that. It's not like a winning matchup, but it was one of those things where it's just like a rogue thing that can sneak in a win. And so I really enjoyed that. But it'd be hypocritical of me to say that, I only want those small formats because in playing Cyber Dragons or in playing Grin Maju, I was still technically like playing a diverse option, which would make me more aligned with like the diverse format sort of, initiative or agenda. So it's complicated. Now, 2 last quick thoughts I wanted to just throw in that are loosely related. The first one is that I have noticed Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats do tend to follow a bit of a bell curve as time goes. So this is just from my time playing the game over many, many years. Usually the beginning of the format, super diverse. A ban list is usually just dropped, and so like everyone's kind of playing different stuff. Everyone's got a different idea of what's going to be good, what is the option, what's the play. And so your first YCS or 2 will have a really wild set of results that just kind of have a little bit of everything. Then usually several weeks into the format, like a month or so in, things kind of get more or less solved, and then that's where the results will sort of like stagnate out as the same 3-4 decks. That's where you kind of know what the best stuff is. And then sometimes towards the end of a format, people will get a little bit bored of whatever the top deck is, and a lot of the best players will already have gotten, their tops, their invites, and things like that, and so they might play something slightly different just for a breath of fresh air or to maybe challenge themselves with something a little bit, that's like off the beaten track, right? That happened a lot in like the Kashtira format, kind of right towards the end before Rise Heart got banned. Okay, second thing is that I find that it's important not to just view YCS results in this discussion. I think it's easy to look at a YCS where, like, you know, a certain deck gets a lot of the top spots and it's like, oh my god, this is the best deck, it's toxic, it's just the worst thing, I hate this format, there's no diversity at all. Because remember, usually when you go to your local card shop, certainly, but even like going to regionals, a lot of the field or the pool of decks you face will vary a fair bit just based on the regional you go to. A regional in my area might look different than a regional in like a California or a Pennsylvania or a Canada or Europe or something like that. Because just different areas kind of through, I guess, Yu-Gi-Oh! Osmosis, just different areas will have different meta games, and that could be due to any number of factors. Maybe more people in this area can't afford to play, you know, Snake Eye, Fire King or whatever, and some people can, and so like you'll just face different stuff because of that. Anyways, gone on long enough. I would love to hear you guys' opinions on this. I've seen a lot of different people with a lot of different takes on it. I don't think that anything is right or wrong, but just to reiterate, for me, when I'm watching, I like diversity. When I'm playing, maybe not as much. All right, see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.